is, if you click on a slider and then you want to use the up and down arrow to adjust it, it doesn't work, okay? So, I mean, all versions of Photoshop previously that worked, but it doesn't work now. So you have to like click on this, and then you can use the up and down arrow. So there's some little bugs in that, like this. Okay, but anyhow, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on my highlight eyedropper, and I'm going to zoom in on my white spot, and I'm going to put the cursor on top of that, and I'm going to click on that. Now see the value. You can't see the value. Okay, you can see the value that that's at right now. Okay, so when I click on it on my highlight eyedropper, no, it changes that. It should be changing it to 244, 244, 244, but it's pretty close to that. Okay, so that's my preference setting for highlights, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute. And then for shadows, I click on the shadow shadow eyedropper, and I'll zoom back out, and I'll go to that spot. Now, on some images, if you pick the right highlight and shadow spot, when you do this, you end up getting better color, because the idea is if you pick a spot that was white to start out with and a spot that was black to start out with, and you force them back to that white and black, then you're going to get a correction on your color, okay? So sometimes you get a freebie, and sometimes it doesn't work. Okay, so with this new CS4 adjustment thing, the way you see before and after is you hold this down to see before, and you release it to see after, okay? So you can see it's a little bit, the color is probably a little bit more realistic afterwards, but it doesn't make a big difference, okay? Like I think the whole image here has sort of a blue cast, and afterwards these colors are a little bit more natural, okay? Sometimes you get a more dramatic improvement. So the other thing I'm going to do with this levels adjustment is, that's very irritating when it does that. Let's see. There we go. I wish there was a setting that says, where do I stick the palettes? I'm done now. Don't reconnect them anymore. Okay, so one thing that I'll do, oh, there we go again, is I'll, normally I have a bigger monitor than this, but when you use one of these projectors, you have to set it to 1024 by 768. So I'm going to open it up a little bit because I want to add some contrast to these seals and the rock here. So in my levels adjustment, I'm going to make it look a little bit flat. And then what I'm going to do is go to my curves adjustment and open that up. Each one of these layers, it's not necessarily that you're just touching at one time. So you sort of do your initial adjustments, and then you sort of play around with it. And you may go back and change the levels adjustment or something like that. In fact, now that I've done the 3 adjustments, if I look at my highlight value and my shadow value, the highlight value looks like about what I want. I usually want to end up with my brightest highlights around 250, because that means if I print them on an Epson printer or in a magazine or something, there'll still be a dot there. If you make them 255, then they just turn out to be white paper, okay? But the blacks, well, maybe for a newspaper that would be good for black, but for an Epson printer, you'd want your blacks a little bit darker than that. So once you've done your initial adjustments, you can go back to the level setting, and I can just move. Now I would call that a bug. What do you guys think? Okay, so if I'm here, I've done these adjustments, and that's 12. Now I go back here. Now it seems to me that this should be still be showing me the cumulative effect, but I've noticed, and it's been doing this for a while, that if I go back there, it's saying that it's 17, and up here it's 12. I mean, I don't know. I'd rather see the 12 when I go back here, so I would call that a bug, because what I want to do is dial that down to like a 2. So what I got to remember is that instead of 12, I've got, well, I'm really going to have 12, so you know, I can move that down to around 5. So what I really want to do is end up with 2, but if I move this down to around 5 and then go back up here, well, you know, see, it doesn't really work.
There's no way to change that in any kind of preference?
I don't believe so. Does anybody else know otherwise? Okay, so I'll set it about there. Now, if you wanted to make that totally neutral, you could actually go into your red channel and you know, adjust that a little bit further. Okay, so like if I wanted those all to be 3, I could adjust the red a little bit further. Oh, but I can't use my up and down here. Okay, so it looks like I either get a 5 or a 2 there. So anyhow, that's probably close enough. Okay, so what I want to do now is open shadows. So I'm going to click on this one. Now, the reason these masks are black is because I've actually got a predefined curve in here that would open up shadow details, okay? But I want to apply that where I want to apply it, okay? So I'm going to get rid of this palette here, and I'm going to type a B for brush, and what I want to do is go into this thing here called Airbrush 7%, and that's sort of a preset that I set up in Photoshop. And what that does is it gives me a soft brush with opacity of 100% but flow of 7%, and then my little airbrush tool is on. Okay. Yeah, and now I'm on my mask. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. Just spacebar, command, click. Okay, and what I want to do is get a little bit more detail in some of these areas. Okay, so I'm just painting with a white brush, and I'm painting on the mask. Okay, so I'm opening up some of these shadows here. I actually normally use a mouse, but I usually like a real mouse instead of this little pad here. But my wife is you know, Wendy Crumpler. She's the co-author of our books, and she's a big mouse person. I mean, she's a pad person. She's been always using a Wacom tablet, and I've been using a mouse, I guess, for a long time. So yeah, it's a little bit clunky with the pad mouse, but when I'm traveling, it's just easier to not have to fiddle around with a mouse.
What's the advantage of doing this as opposed to going to image adjustments, shadow highlights?
Oh, well, I'll show you. Okay, so once I've sort of got my shadow areas taken care of, okay, and again, you know, this is just using my default curve for shadows, okay. Then what I can do is I can say, okay, well, I've got my basic mask now, okay, so those areas where the mask is white. So if you option click on the mask, you can toggle between seeing the mask or seeing the image, okay? And then when you shift click on the mask, it turns the mask off, okay? So you can see if I painted everything totally white, I'd actually see a little bit more shadow detail. But the other thing you can do is once you've got your basic mask, you can double click on your curve, and then you can adjust your curve, okay? Now, if you want to see where these values are on the curve,